Shalom, shalom. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ahchyam, Yahweh Shai, Ahchyam, Rakakodash. I want to give double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessing and many salutations to you, elect Ahchyam, across the four winds of this earth, kicking this word in sincerity and in truth. For those of you all who are fans or into boxing, you have what's called making weight. And the process for a boxer to make particular weight is a very tedious process. All right, what he has to do is, of course, mass amounts of exercise. He has to cut off particular things that he might do within his daily life, all right, that he knows won't benefit him in regards to him making that weight. Okay, he has to use a particular diet plan for a certain meal prep program. Okay, mass amounts of exercise, mental discipline. There's an abundance of things a great boxer, a boxer in general, all right, but especially the greats, but there's an abundance of tedious activity that those boxers have to commit themselves to in order to make weight during the fight. Okay, and what that example of is shown in regards to those boxers that have to make weight is called temperance. Okay, now when you go into the word temperance, give me one sec. This word temperance is, and this is my Etymology Explorer app. It says habitual moderation in regard to the indulgence of natural appetites and passions, restrained or moderate indulgence, moderation, as temperance in eating and drinking, temperance in the indulgence of joy and mirth, specifically moderation, and sometimes abstinence in respect to using intoxicating liquors. You keep going down, it says moderation of passion, patience, which means to suffer, calmness, settedness, one of the 7 heavenly virtues. It says state with regard to heat or cold temperature. Okay, so naturally when you go into this word temperance, it goes into moderation. Okay, you have particular fighters that aren't even at home during training camp because they have to get away from their worldly lusts, get away from their worldly desires, so they can actually be pinpoint focused in the objective that's at hand. And that's the word temperance. Okay. Now the Apostle Paul speaks on temperance in the book of 1 Corinthians, the 9th chapter. And I'm going to get that actually. Give me one sec. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 9. I'm going to start at verse 25. Now, before I read, I did a lesson a few days ago going into leaven and asking the question, is there any leaven in you? And when you go into that leaven just all in general goes into the impurities that dwell within us. And he's likened that leaven to actual leaven. And we're approaching the time of the Passover, where we're supposed to clean our houses. And more so, the Passover is a spiritual symbolic representation of our exodus out of the land of our captivity, which was Egypt. So how much more do we have to apply this here when we know that we're getting ready to exit the captivity out of Mystery Babylon? Okay, and as we were told to get that excess leaven out of our homes before we had fled Egypt into the wilderness, as we were going into the land of promise, we're supposed to physically empty our homes of leaven, of course, before the Passover. But more so, we're supposed to empty our vessels, which is ourself, of any excess leaven that might remain within us before we exit out of this land, into the land of promise, into those chariots. Okay, and it's a mentality that we have to have, and it's called temperance. Okay, that's why I used the boxing missing weight and losing weight or making weight as an example of that temperance. Okay, because just as a fighter has to make weight before he goes into a fight, us being spiritual fighters, us being those that are contending for the faith, have to do the same thing in a spiritual format, in a spiritual manner. And you find it so spiritual why brothers are so into trimming off fat, getting their weight right, getting their health right, on top of getting their spirits right. As we enter into the Passover, knowing that we're at the very end, we see the coronavirus, more people getting it. Okay, we see a lot of these other guys just bugging out in regards to the doctrine. Okay, we see wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes in diverse places. These are things that the Lord had told us to measure. And these things that we see are indicators which show that we are at the very end. So why not get yourself in order? Okay. This is the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 25. And it says, and every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now, when you go into this word striveth here in the Greek, I believe that word is athleos, which is where you get athlete from. Let's see. Okay, this is something different right here. Hold on.
Amai. Agonizamai.
Okay, so it's agonizamai. Okay. And it says to enter into a contest, to contend in the gymnastic games, to contend with adversaries or a fight. It says metaphor, to contend, struggle with difficulties and dangers, to endeavor with tremendous zeal, to abstain something. Okay. So it takes zeal to be temperate. It takes mass zeal to be temperate. Like when you look at a boxer or a fighter, as it said right here in the second example, it takes zeal for those men to cut off all that weight. Okay. It takes tremendous zeal, tremendous dedication, tremendous temperance, which goes into moderation or abstinence of particular things. Okay. So you look at that as a physical example, and you look at what we're involved in spiritually. Okay, because Paul likens this, as we're reading this here in 1 Corinthians, the 9th chapter, he's likening this to the different games that he used to watch back then. Like you had the race, previous verse went into a race. You had the fight, you had boxers back then. All right, gymnastics. Paul was definitely one who was involved, or I should say, who was intrigued with the Olympic Games back then. And as Paul used to speak to those different churches, he would speak to those different churches in ways that they could understand. Okay, he would speak to them in carnal ways so they could understand the spiritual meaning behind what he was talking about. All right, matter of fact, this is 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Matter of fact, it's in chapter 3. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 1. And Paul says, and I, brethren, could not speak unto you as spiritual, but as unto carnal, even as unto babes in a Mashiach. All right, so that there's an example of him speaking to them in carnal fashions. That way they can understand the spiritual meaning or the spiritual message, what he was attempting to convey. Okay, so it says, and every man that striveth for the masteries is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible crown. Okay. And what's the incorruptible crown? Ultimately, it's that garment that's clothed in white, receiving that salvation, receiving that crown that Yahushua is going to place on all the elect's head. And the only way that we can receive these things is if we're strict and disciplined to ourselves. Okay. Now, of course, understanding that we're not going to walk around holier than now, because yes, we are in carnal, sinful flesh. But as we get closer to the end, we're at least supposed to chip at that old man daily and shut off that excess fat, trim that excess fat so we can make weight, and that weight being entering into those chariots and receiving those new bodies. All right. But there's a particular way that we have to conduct ourselves and discipline ourselves. Again, we are considered disciples of Yahushua. And when you go into that word disciple, that word goes into discipline. So yes, we do have to discipline ourselves in particular ways, forms, and fashions, because you look at the rest of the world, they're not disciplined. You look at particular people that claim to believe in the Bible, Christians, they're not disciplined within their lives. We were commanded to go out to the highways and the hedges. We were commanded to preach. We were commanded to pay alms. We were commanded to be brotherly. We were commanded to be diligent and to give diligence to make our calling and election sure. Okay? And part of that diligence is shedding off that old man. Okay? Part of that diligence is also ruling your spirit. Just as a prize fighter or a boxer has to rule over his spirit so he can make weight, we have to do the same thing in like fashion so we can receive the kingdom of heaven. Because you look in the ancient world, after we had exited out of the land of Egypt, we were in the wilderness for 40 years because the majority of Israel wasn't willing to rule over their spirit. All right? After they had seen all those marvelous things that the Lord had wrought upon the land of Egypt, just a little bit after, Jake couldn't take that light affliction that they were going through, and they automatically threw everything that they had seen that the Lord had done to the side. Now we look at it today, all the marvelous works that the Lord is doing today. I mean, you have men that have all joined together, just met off YouTube. That's a work and a miracle within itself. Okay? So we can definitely see the Heavenly Father performing his works that he had promised that he was going to do. We do see the plagues coming forth that you read about in the book of Exodus, starting around the 6th chapter all the way up to the 12th. We're seeing these things come to pass, and these are miracles and works that's being done from the Lord. Okay? The will of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua is definitely being done on the planet Earth. Okay? So as we see these things coming forth, it's definitely important that we do rule over our spirit to the best of our ability. All right, going into trimming, and it's been the spirit that brothers have been going into trimming, going into purging these things so much. All right, just as a fighter, and it's a reason why I keep using this example, because I'm reading the book of 1 Corinthians, the 9th chapter. Okay, let's get back to it. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 25. It says, "And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things." Okay, so it ain't just a few, but it's in all things, having all things in moderation. Okay, just as a boxer has to eat in moderation. A boxer has to practice and exercise in moderation. A boxer has to sleep in moderation. A boxer, even when it comes to his sex life, he has to monitor those particular things so it doesn't affect him. All right, when it's time for him to perform. All right, and also too, when he performs in front of an audience, and that's what we're doing through the Spirit. That's why you read it in the book of Hebrews, the 12th chapter, starting at the top. It says, "Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight." All right, let us lay aside every weight. What does that weight involve? Excess. That weight involves things that we don't need to have as we go into the fight. That's why I'm titling this lesson, "We Have to Make Weight Through the Spirit." Lord willing, that's going to be the title of this lesson. But it says, let us lay aside every weight. All right? Because who are the cloud of witnesses that we're performing in front of? We have the angels that watch our moves. There's demons on the left-hand side that try to get us to slip. You have the brothers that surround you. Okay? Which, of course, you want to be an example in front of those brothers. In being a leader, we make sure that we want to show moderation in front of those brothers. That way they can continue to show moderation within themselves. Younger brothers and brothers that might be over you. At the end of the day, we're all examples to one another. And we have witnesses that's watching our every move within this performance that we have. Okay? And if there's excess weight that you have, that could definitely slow you down from receiving that prize, which is that crown, which is that new body, receiving the kingdom of heaven within the first go around. It says, "In the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us." So he's likening that sin to that weight that could be attached to you. All right. And being those contenders for the truth, our job is to shed that weight off. Our job is to shed that sin off so that sin doesn't compel us, or that sin doesn't what's the word I'm looking for? That sin doesn't rule over us. Okay? It says, looking unto Yahushua, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of the Most High. Okay, so we want to make sure that we have our minds right as Yahushua had his mind right. Because ultimately Yahushua is the lead example. Okay, and we're witnesses to that. We bore witness to Yahushua's sufferings. Hey, as the elder Yashawamba likes to say, man, we could very well be those men, all right, that had bore Yahushua's resurrection. All right, watching his persecution and his resurrection. So definitely we represent spectators to that event that had taken place in regards to Yahushua. And as Yahushua had endured the cross, he had endured those sufferings, even unto blood. All right. Morphily, Yahushua laid aside that weight. He had laid aside that sin. So he was able to run that race and complete his course, fulfill his course as it was promised and predestined for him to fulfill. And if we're those men, we definitely have to conduct ourselves in very familiar fashions to Yahushua. And the reason why I said familiar, of course, it's not going to be pinpoint to the T. Okay, but we want to make sure that we do the best in our ability to perform this. Okay. Now I want to read this here in this book called The Manners and the Customs of the Bible. Okay. And when you read the Manners and Custom 864, it goes into temperance. And I was reading this, and that through the Spirit inspired me to go into this lesson. Because again, Paul would use examples of things that he would see, experiences that he would go through, especially in the Greco-Roman world, where a lot of those Israelites that were scattered throughout those regions, they could only understand particular things when Paul would allude those things that they were familiar with in their lifestyles. And again, that was that Greco-Roman way. Okay, so when you read this here, it says, among the 4 sacred games of the ancient Greeks, the Olympic and the Isthmian were the most celebrated. All right, mind you, the Olympics stemmed all the way back to, I believe, 600 something BC. Okay, so this is actually a little bit even before Babylon. Okay, I believe it was around 600, either 300 and some change or 600 and some change BC. But the Olympics go way back around that time. So it's nothing recent. Okay, as you see today, those races, those boxers, them fighting for the gold medal, representing their country. You had that take place back in the ancient world. And you had particular men, all right, that we study about, different authors in these scriptures, namely in the New Testament, that were spectators of these events, as we're spectators of these events today. All right, brothers like boxing, brothers are into sports and such, just like back then. But when you keep reading, it says, to these familiar games, the apostle makes many allusions to their writings, in his writings. It says, there are 2 of such in this text. Every competitor in these games was obliged to undergo a severe and protracted training, sometimes lasting nearly a year, during which time he carefully avoided excess of every kind. Note it said every kind. That's why when you read it in 1 Corinthians 9 and 25, it says, strive for mastery is tempered in all things. All right. And when you go into that word mastery, that word is Stephanos in the Greek, which goes into a crown. So in order to receive this incorruptible crown, we have to be temperate in all things. OK, are you overindulging in particular things in your life that you know that could be slowing you down and adding on to the sin that's within you? These are things that we monitor. And this is that self-examination that we have to do to ourselves before judgment. All right. That's why it's written in Sirach 18, before judgment, examine thyself. OK. But when you keep reading, it says, a passage from Epictetus so beautifully illustrates this text that it is cited by most commentators. It says, would you be a victor in the Olympic Games? So in good truth would I, for it is a glorious thing. But pray consider what must go before and what may follow. And so proceed to the attempt. You must then live by rule. Eat what will be disagreeable, refrain from delicacies. You must oblige yourself in constant exercise at the appointed hour in heat and in cold. You must abstain from wine and cold liquors. In a word, you must be submissive to all the directions of your master as those of a physician. Okay, so he's using those physical examples of ways that they had to be temperate, certain things that they had to trim off in order to be a champion. And a lot of those physical things they had to trim off in the flesh, you still have to trim it off in the flesh, being in the spirit. Okay? If wine is one of your biggest weaknesses, it has to be monitored. It has to be done in moderation. Okay? If overeating is something that you're doing too much of, it has to be in moderation. Okay? And the scripture talks about much meat can give you choler. All right. And when you go into that word choler, it goes into sickness and it also goes into anger. Okay. And I know there was a point of time myself, hey, that chicken and that steak, that stuff be good, man. But I noticed it wasn't good for my health. So I know something that I've been working on, just as a personal testimony, is cutting that off. Okay. Not completely, but just only really resorting to it on particular days. Okay. You even read about certain accounts in the book of Acts, all right, when there were certain men that were of the church that had refrained from particular meats in order to join the ministry or the mission with Paul and Silas. I believe you can read about that in the book of Acts, the 18th chapter, and also I think the 21st or the 22nd chapter, all right, where you add particular men that had took the vow of the Nazarite and they had abstained from particular meats and particular things. Okay, so there's actually things that you could indulge in the physical flesh that could have a negative factor to your spirit. Okay. And also too, there's particular things that we need to cut off in our flesh so our spirits can grow. Matter of fact, I got a quick precept here in the book of Romans, the 9th chapter. I'm sorry, Romans 14, and I'm going to start at verse 20. It's the book of Romans chapter 14, verse 20. And it says, for meat destroyeth not the work of the Most High. All things indeed are pure, but it is evil for the man who eateth with offense. It is good neither to eat flesh, nor to drink wine, nor anything whereby thy brother stumbleth, or is offended, or is made weak. Hast thou faith? Have it to thyself before the Most High. Happy is he that condemneth not himself in the thing which he alloweth. All right, and looking back at a boxer or a prize fighter, look at Andy Ruiz for the example. And for you all who might not watch boxing, Andy Ruiz was the one who had beat the champion Anthony Joshua back in June. And he was a little bit overweight, all right, but it was a shocking upset that had actually upset the whole world because Andy Ruiz was considered a tomato can fighter. He was a replacement fighter because really Anthony Joshua was supposed to fight Jarrell Miller. But Jarrell Miller got tested for he got tested positive for performance enhancing drugs. So Andy Ruiz was a fighter that they threw in there last minute the week prior. And Andy Ruiz actually upset the world and beat Anthony Joshua by upset. But there was a rematch that had taken place a few months later. I believe that was around November or so. Okay. But Andy Ruiz had packed on weight. He was eating tacos before the fight. He was overindulging in alcohol and drink and ended up gaining hella more weight than his previous fight with Anthony Joshua and ended up losing by a wide margin because what did he do? Okay. He allowed too many things within his life and that condemned him in the boxing ring. He ended up getting beat. Okay. So you look at that more in a spiritual manner. If you're indulging in your flesh and expect to perform well in the fight, it's not going to happen. And we wonder why guys are falling out. We're wondering why guys are getting weaker in the spirit. Now, I'm not saying it like, and again, I'm not saying it like I'm anybody because I know myself personally. Hey, I got to constantly work every day as we all do, you know, but still being in this faith, and every single last one of us can attest to this. We see different patterns that what men go through when they fall out. And a lot of it is they overindulge in particular things because that faith is small. Okay. And we want to make sure that we continue to press forth so we don't fall within that category. Okay. And do you have the instances where you might be weak in the spirit? Hey, absolutely. You know, that's why I said it again. I'm not saying this to tear nobody down or anything, because we all have certain instances where we might fall short and another brother is used through the Spirit to lift you back up. But we're in the time right now where we do need to indulge in more spiritual things and indulge less in the carnal things. Okay, and that's how you grow within the Spirit. Okay, again, as we read in 1 Corinthians, the 9th chapter, it's stated to be temperate in all things. Okay, verse 23, and he that doubteth is damned if he eat, because he eateth not of faith. For whatsoever is not of faith is sin. Okay, so ultimately, to be temperate in all things, it takes an abundance of faith in order to do that. Okay, and it's written in Hebrews, the 11th chapter, the 6th verse. Matter of fact, let's get it. It says, but without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to the Most High must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder to them that diligently seek him. All right. So if we're practicing being temperate in particular things, cutting off that old man, getting rid of that leaven, best believe the Most High is going to deal with us in a higher level than he was dealing with us before. Now, understanding on top of that, there is going to be more perils and affliction that we are going to have to go through. But as long as we're able to endure this, okay, as long as we're able to endure through this patience, which patience means suffering, as long as we're able to be patient, the Lord is going to continue to deal with us, and he's going to reward us with particular things. All right, as these fighters were rewarded with that corruptible crown, as they had overwent that intensive purifying process, laying off that weight that was on them, how much more so do we have to apply this within a spiritual matter? Okay, now I'm going to keep reading this here in this manners and customs. It says, when you keep reading, it says, thus Paul says in the text, every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. The victor was rewarded with the crown or chaplet of leaves. And that chaplet of leaves was that ornament of leaves that they would put around your head. All right. It says the Olympic crown was made of the leaves of the wild olive. The Isthmian was made of pine or ivory. From the earliest periods of history, chaplets of leaves were bestowed upon heroes who had conquered on the field of battle. Thus the psalmists say that the triumphant Messiah upon himself shall his crown flourish. And again, that's in Psalms chapter 132, verse 18. It says the idea of a crown flourishing is very excessive when spoken of a leafy chaplet. Though some competitors render the word shrine, this is the sort of crown to which Paul refers to the text as corruptible. The crown of thorns which was placed on the Savior's head was a mockery of these wreaths for triumph, as well as the golden crown of kings. And it gives different scriptures as examples of Yahushua having that crown of thorns on his head. It says the leafy crown given to the victor in these ancient games doubtless furnishes the metaphor which is used in 2 Timothy chapter 2. I write in James chapter 1 verse 12. And it goes into different scriptures going into that crown. All right. So the Apostle Paul is actually speaking on boxing here or racing here in these examples. All right. And he's likening these physical examples to what we're going through spiritually, running the race, as it's written in Habakkuk, he that runneth readeth it. All right. And also too, within this fight, we're contending for the faith. That word contend means to be runner up for the prize. And every single last one of us are runners up for the prize. Again, as the scriptures say, we have been called. Okay. But those that are chosen are ultimately those that are going to be temperate in all things as they're here, the whole time that they're here in the flesh. And this is the fight. This is what we're fighting for. Okay. That fight of temperance isn't easy, especially here within this sinful flesh. Okay. But hey, the scriptures say that those men are going to be temperate in those things. Okay. And I got one more scripture I'm going to end off here. And it's going to be in the book of Proverbs, the 9th chapter, the 32nd verse. Proverbs 9. Hold on. No, it's not Proverbs 9 and 32. Hold on. Give me one sec. One sec. I'm sorry, not 9 and 32. I got it mixed up with 1 Corinthians. Proverbs 16 and 32. All right. And it reads, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty. He that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh the city. Okay. And when you go into rule also is a unit of measurement as well. Okay. Or have dominion over. That word rule in the Hebrew is mashal, and it says to have rule, have dominion, to reign, to rule, to have dominion, to cause to rule, to exercise dominion. All right. And when you look at a boxer, again, I keep using this as an example. When they make weight, when they shut off that weight, they're ruling over their spirit. They have to rule over particular things that the average person indulges in so they can make that weight. Okay. And we're looking at it spiritually, ruling over our spirits, casting off that extra weight, which is sin, to the side so we can make weight. All right. Matter of fact, I got one more scripture I ended off on. I believe it's in Galatians. Let's see here. This is it, Galatians 6 and 16. And it reads, and as many as walk according to this rule, peace be on them and mercy and upon the Israel of the Most High. Okay, so there's a particular way that we have to conduct ourselves in order to walk with Yahweh Shai, in order to get beamed up into that chariot at the end of the day, to walk in godliness. Okay, and that's ruling over your spirit. When you go into this word rule right here in the Greek, the word is kanon.
Strong's G 2583. Kanon. Kanon.
It says a rod or straight piece of rounded wood to which anything is fastened to keep it straight, used for various purposes: a measuring rod, a carpenter's line or measuring tape, a measure of a leap as in the Olympic Games. All right, there goes that example, that athletic example again. But the only way to strive for that, okay, is being temperate. But this is the rule that we go by, man. Ruling over the flesh, having dominion over your spirit. Hey, there's a kingdom that comes with that. There's a reward that comes with that, and it ultimately takes faith to be able to do that. All right, so we all, every single last one of us, including myself, have to make sure that we're monitoring the things that we might allow and trimming off that excess weight so we can be able to make weight in a spiritual matter. Okay, but I'm going to end this lesson off on that. Lord willing, this was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachakwadash. I want to give double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessing and many salutations to you, elect Ahchyam, across the four winds of this earth, kicking this word in sincerity and in truth. Shalom.